Now hear this. Marcus Phoenix and Hazard Watch to CIC immediately. Phoenix, Santiago, and Stratton, report to CIC immediately.
Yeah. I heard you the first time.
The Gears of War franchise is famously notorious for its hyperbolic macho soldiers donning armor that looks like it weighs more than a freaking car. Let's not forget its absurd automatic rifle's chainsaw bayonet and its over-the-top gory combat. Epic Games launched their first major flagship after the Unreal games on November 7th of 2007. A busy year seeing many long-awaited games releasing such as the Darkness 2, Army of Two, and Half-Life 2. Jesus, that's a lot of twos. Its reception shocked the world by selling over 3 million copies within the first 10 weeks of its release. What made it stand out from its competition was its refined approach to third-person shooters, its insanely imaginative aesthetic with gothic tones, and its bleak atmosphere with occasional dips into the horror genre. Its refined mechanics surrounding the cover-to-cover gameplay did it wonders in the gameplay department. Add in its incredibly brutal animations and it's really easy to see why it scored near perfect reviews upon release. Epic's billion-dollar franchise saw the release of 3 mainline titles. Well, 4 if you count Judgment, but let's be honest, no one does. The expanding narrative established in their trilogy would hit its highs and its lows effectively, ultimately coming to a satisfying close that left most fans happy with what they got. This is something many development studios continue to struggle with today, is finding a satisfying ending. Humanity would be able to start anew after decades of war that ravaged the human population and the surface of Sarah. A subterranean race known as the Locusts sparked a war when they emerged from deep within the planet in hopes of inhabiting the surface by exterminating their opposition, humans. Everyone thought that the end of 3 would be the last of the IP, but we were wrong because of money. Gears 4 was announced at E3 2015 with a gameplay demo reveal. At the beginning of 2016, the Coalition dropped a CGI trailer showing what looked like Marcus Phoenix's son. It contrasted him as a young boy and a grown man donning that familiar armor and the chainsaw rifle. God, this studio knows how to make an emotionally impactful trailer. Everything from the music to hints of nostalgia showing an older Marcus, it just made me so happy. Microsoft dropped the news that the Coalition, formerly known as Black Tusk, would be taking the reins on the new entries and producing another trilogy. Copious amounts of fans, myself included, were reasonably skeptical. I for one really didn't think we needed more, but here we are. Not even a year later, Gears 4 released to the eager masses, scoring mostly positive reviews all around. Sure, it's somewhat familiar and the characters weren't as interesting as their predecessors, but the gameplay pretty much remained intact. It was gory, flashy, and most importantly, buttery smooth. With the release of 2 of the 3 planned titles, I think it's safe to say we all get a gist of what we can expect from the last entry in the series. It's time to discuss what the new games did better than the old and vice versa. Do the newer titles stack up against the games that came before, or does it stumble into a sinkhole?
Now the fun begins.
Epic Games' triple feat bestowed protagonist Marcus Phoenix upon its players, a soldier in the Coalition of Ordered Governments, or COG Army. Court-martialed and left to rot in prison for an eternity after abandoning his post during a Locust advance to hold a central piece of the city. He did this to save his father, an act that would ironically be the saving grace for humanity. He is released from his confines by his best friend and longtime fan favorite Dom Santiago, throwing him back into the desperate fight. Marcus is a natural-born killer and a battle-hardened man that knows nothing but war. He's often abrasive and reluctant to let people walk all over him or even share emotion with a longtime fling, Anya Stroud.
You and your tower and all this fucking emotion can go to hell!
It's clear that Marcus has some inner demons and he struggles with the suppression of his emotions. He's put up a barrier to the outside world, but despite this, there are beams of his humanity that come through more frequently as the narrative progresses.
I'm sorry about Maria, but she's in a better place now. You did what you had to do.
It often feels like he's braving the weight of the entire world on his shoulders, not because he can, but out of necessity to turn the tides of a losing battle. He shares a classic underdog story so many protagonists do. He starts as an imprisoned court-martialed soldier, rises as a leader among the troops in the trenches, and plays a pivotal role in bringing the war that verges on humanity's extinction to a close. He's a straight-up badass that often struggles with his own humanity. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Now, the Gears titles developed under the Coalition approaches its protagonist differently, with the main characters switching in its sequel. In Gears 4, we play as JD, a somewhat immature, naive young adult that has yet to see real war. Kate Diaz takes the reins in Gears 5. She's a former outcast like JD turned cog. Not all is normal with her, as she starts having vividly nightmarish dreams that seem to point to some connection to the long-deceased Locust. I'll start with JD because it's a little complicated. In Gears 4, he's underutilized as a lead, straight up, and not much of a standout. Though the character is voiced well and has great charisma, he lacks a commanding presence, grit, and depth. JD has never seen real combat involving heavy stakes. He's still very much a young man learning his place in the world. His adolescent growth is clearly defined when he runs back to his dad for help. Honestly, this is a good thing because Marcus is without a doubt one of the best parts of Gears 4. The Coalition went with a contrasted approach, emphasizing witty banter that felt like it was conversed between high school friends.
Look, the construction hub's just over that wall. Unless it magically lowers! Nope, we need a way around.
The writing isn't bad by any means, but it felt like three friends shooting the shit most of the time. The group often plays off serious moments, taking away the tension immediately.
How about I call you hungover? Oh, you got some chuff, boy, don't you?
Uncle, you're obviously hungover.
Actually, I'm still a little drunk.
However, in the follow-up Gears 5, JD has a compelling arc in that he must come to terms with his heated mistakes involving the death of several innocents. This pushes him away from the trio just when he finally starts to grow as a character, resulting in him being off-screen for a large portion of its playtime. Kate Diaz follows the same pattern. In Gears 4, her deep roots in the life of an outcast is kind of cool, but they don't elaborate on it much. It was really intriguing to see the opposition being the COG government when they were the good guys, quote unquote, in the last set of games. But they quickly push that to the side and take it all back with its follow-up Gears 5. In many ways, Gears 5 felt like a do-over, because she's much better here. Thank God she is, because we spend the entire game with her outside of the prologue. Her journey through 5 is compelling to a degree, as her connection to the Locust seems to be bloodline related.
Why did you come here with me? What did JD tell you?
Kate, I am not gonna hurt you.
No? Maybe you should. Or maybe I should.
Kate.
I think the final payoff for its narrative is a little underwhelming because it really felt like they were building her up to be the next Hive Queen, a choice that would have made the story way more impactful for me. The OG trilogy just nailed its characters from the get-go. This sentiment rings true for the supporting cast as well. Baird has this great level of cynicism and sarcasm that alleviates stressful situations, even if he doesn't always have the best timing.
Yeah, you're right about the smells lingering forever.
He's a mechanic at heart, and he has funny yet endearing connections to his robot companions. The Coltrane is the former professional sports player that still embodies his energized youth and is a nice contrast to the rest of the more serious cast.
Yo, the Coltrane don't go woo-woo. It's woo!
Dom Santiago helps ground them all with pure emotion and heart.
I'll see you all again one day. Look, Marcus is busy saving the world again, so I gotta be there for him.
More standouts were added in later entries, but these were the most prevalent ones. Even the Carmine brothers clicked with audiences, and that wasn't planned. Due to fan reception, the developers actually introduced the Carmine family, seeing a new brother in all 3 of its games. The most recent supporting cast members have gems, but most feel like shallow retreads of series favorites. Del is a good example of this. He loves his robotic allies, and it's a typical conversation piece for him, just like Baird. but outside of that attachment, he really doesn't have a story. If you took him out of Gears 5, not a lot would change, which is a damn shame because he has an infectious charisma.
See, I told you it's not you, it's her.
I guess what I'm saying is I wanted more backstory for him. Foz is a highlight despite his short screen time, and he doesn't even show up until Gears 5. He's a conflicted character that hides this by overcompensating his arrogance.
Oi, Del. You're gonna be okay.
His first appearance makes you hate him, but by the time the credits roll, he managed to wiggle his way into my heart. This is writing and character growth I wanted more of, especially in the main cast. Epic's trilogy centers on Delta Squad. It follows their journey below the planet's surface and in the trenches of Sarah. They fight through endless hordes in hopes of finding a way to end the war and bring peace back to the war-torn surface. Obviously, it's a lot more intricate than that, but I'm just simplifying it here. A lot of the narrative's best moments lie within the characters and their arcs. That's not to say that the main plot doesn't have urgency and depth, because it does. For instance, Dom's search for his long-lost love is emotionally impactful, which results in his eventual downfall of his will to fight and his sacrifice in 3.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Maria. I tried to find you. God, I did.
Cole's bittersweet trip down memory lane with his thrashball past is heartwarming, yet devastating. Even Ty, a character with hardly any screen presence, has depth aided by how others see him and talk about him. He dies at his own hands after his capture and torture by Locust troops. These moments help encapsulate the reaches and consequences of war and the hell it brings to people that aren't even directly in the conflict. The new story lacks little moments like these that would have helped the overall experience, which sucks because they tease some of these. In Gears 4, JD remarks on the passing of his mother without going into detail. It's never brought up again until the beginning of Gears 5 when we learn her true death. The way it's so haphazardly spilled out and forgotten is so freaking annoying. This could have been a point of contention with JD as we see flashbacks with him and his mother, showing their relationship. Anya was a strong character in the previous games, but she's just kind of forgotten here. There are other instances I can think of, like why are JD and Marcus estranged in Gears 4? It's never touched on. Anyway, I'm getting carried away. The new crew's journey starts with them as outcasts among a cog-ruled world and turns into a fight for their lives when their village is attacked by unknown creatures. Of course, this later turns out to be the mounds of Locust corpses rising from mass burial sites. Their first title plays it a little too safe, and even capitalizes on that by having Marcus tag along with the group to find Kate's kidnapped mother. Gears 5 started diverging slightly to become its own identity. Yes, it was still heavily relying on past lore and characters, but it introduced upgradable skills, semi-open areas to explore, and depth to its mains JD and Kate. 4 felt like it wasn't confident enough in its characters and as a result relied on series favorites like Cole, Baird, and Marcus. The newer titles also just lacked that grandiose scale of upping the stakes. I'll never forget having to fight through a giant city-sinking riftworm, destroying its insides and antibodies to stop it. The Locusts have such a deep connection with the planet that they are using this as a military asset to sink the last remaining safe haven for humanity. Speaking of the Locusts, they're a character of their own here too, afforded a backstory that gives them personality. They emerge from the planet's hollow because of a losing battle with an infection that forces them onto the surface. They have their own culture, network, and society. The Swarm in the new set of games again just feels so hollow. The Coalition honestly pulled a Star Wars raid trilogy here. Being afraid of deviating too much from the winning formula results in a safe product. The newer films directly copy the previous films while spitting in the face of the characters and their fitting endings. The First Order is the Empire, Kylo Ren is the new Darth Vader, and Starkiller Base is just 20 Death Stars put together. The Swarm are the Locust. Queen Reyna is literally Queen Mira. You get where I'm going with this. Sometimes it feels like the new games are just spitting in the face of the OG characters. It seems like what they went through was for nothing. Overall, the story was a lot more compelling and better paced in Epics. The narrative the Coalition presents is interesting on the outside, but it hasn't elaborated enough for me to be fully invested. Especially when they just throw an out-of-place choice at the end of 5 where you must choose between Del or JD. Despite having spent a large amount of time with Del, most people are gonna pick JD. For one, he's a better character, but two, no one wants to see Marcus suffer anymore. These games differ drastically when it comes to their presentation, art design, and color schemes. Gears 1 through 3 are known for their oppressive visual design. Its muted colors and war-torn environments evoke a sense of misery and hopelessness that emphasizes disaster. Humanity is on its last legs fighting a losing battle against an enemy that severely outnumbers them. This artistic style does an amazing job at depicting this. This bleak design helped too with the game's many hair-raising moments of palpable dread and fear of the unknown. It's easy to say that the newer games look better regarding fidelity because they have the advantage of new technology. They utilize new techniques like performance capture, high-res textures, ray tracing, and incredible lighting. Seeing how it's a Microsoft flagship, it definitely looks the part. With that being said, Gears 4 and 5 create their own unique style without taking away from the previous one. I'm a big fan of the more varied and vibrant color palette, offering up blues, reds, and yellows. Something I still can't get over is how sharp the freaking armor looks. It looks so badass, like I could just reach in the screen and touch it. The newer games also just offer more varied environments to traverse accompanied by weather events. It all truly looks amazing, and I just gotta give this one to the Coalition. Now, gameplay is something that seemed to stay quite consistent across all its games, with small improvements here and there. A cover shooter at its core with tight over-the-shoulder gunplay and over-the-top gory close-quarters mayhem. To reflect the bulky builds of its characters, gameplay is slower paced. The franchise's wide arsenal is incredibly fun to use and make you feel like a goddamn powerhouse. The series' trademark Lancer is a beefy-sounding rifle with an ability to completely chop up whatever finds itself on the other end of it. Even the newest additions feel good to handle, like the drop shot, a grenade launcher style weapon that drops a drill onto his enemies if it's timed right. A mechanic called active reload is one of its most recognizable gameplay features across the board. This is where the player can get an increased damage output on the new clip by hitting a timed interval in a bar. This adds a lot of depth to the combat and also adds a strategic element to its engagements. Executions were added in the 2009 sequel, which provided all manner of horrendous sights employed by the game's many weapons, and even your character's fists, which have carried forward since its arrival. The Coalition added significant improvements to the gameplay formula by creating slower-paced open areas in Gears 5's campaign with a vehicle to drive that feels satisfying. On top of that, they added Jack, a new sidekick robot with upgradable abilities that help diversify its gameplay loop. Stealth is now actually a viable option with cloak tech, and Jack can bring items to you from cover and out of reach areas when prompted. A knife melee attack was added as well, giving the player the ability to melee at any time, though it's not overly effective. These help change up a somewhat stagnant formula, even if it still worked. Because of these additions, Gears 5 is without a doubt the best feeling game of the series to date. Man, oh man, the music and sound design in all of these games is an incredible treat for the ears. The armor clanking as each piece moves in tandem with the body is glorious. The sound of the Lancer coming to a halt as the last bullets leave the chamber sound fantastic, while also doubling as an audio cue to let you know to reload. Enemies' lower bass chatter is distinctly inhuman and sinister, offering an experience that paints them as a tangible threat. Gears of War 2 has lots of haunting, bombastic music that features orchestras, lots of crescendos, and choirs. I listen to 2's soundtrack on Spotify to this day. Gears 5's soundtrack deviates slightly as tracks have more modern computerized riffs and effects like the utilization of some synths. While their soundtrack is a little more mellow, it still has its fair share of highs. Both pulled off their audio in the highest regard. Though I enjoyed a lot of what Gears 5 brought to the table, the new round of games fails to capture the grittiness hellscape of war that made those first 3 very special. Original Gears depicted the realities of wartime like loss, sacrifice, and honor. It's about these small victories while fighting a battle they know they can't win conventionally. The Coalition tries to add a bit more of this depth in 5, but it never really hits the same, and its big moments sometimes feel
I
half-baked.
hope you're not here to stop us.
Actually,
Because you can't.
Kate,
Maybe you should try listening for once.
Kate. I'm listening.
Yeah, well, don't bother. I'm done.
It doesn't help that their execution has a lighthearted approach. Gameplay through all of the games has remained pretty much unchanged with a few new additions here and there. For example, I really liked Gears 5's more open areas ripe for exploration. Epic Saga felt wholly authentic and did a considerably better job in its world and narrative while tackling deep themes. The new generation plays it a bit safe, relying heavily on the foundations that made it successful back in the day, instead of being bold enough to be entirely distinct. The Coalition's games aren't bad by any means. I've had a tremendous amount of fun with them, but it's hard to see why we needed more aside from money. That's gonna wrap it up for this video, guys. If you do like the content, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and that's everything. Peace out.